Welcome to episode 8 of the 3am Fear podcast. In the previous episode, we discussed about the story of Lizzie Borden and a detailed timeline leading up to the murders of her parents, Andrew and Abby Borden. In this episode, we will be talking about the aftermath of the incidents. What happened after the bodies were found? If you haven't listened to part 1, please do check it out because 1 always comes before 2. So now let's continue with the story. Hello and welcome to the 3am Fear podcast. I'm Nikita Ferrao, mystery and thriller author. On this podcast, I talk about real crimes and real people. Due to the graphic nature of some of this content, listener discretion is advised. You can find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. Let's get started. Now, Adelaide Churchill, Lizzie's neighbor, saw Bridget running when she was looking out of the window. She saw Lizzie standing there who said, "Come quick, something happened to father." By the time Churchill reached, Lizzie was now sitting at the bottom of the chair. When Churchill asked where Lizzie was, she said the exact same thing, that she was in the barn getting some iron. She then goes ahead to tell the same story, Abby being away, something had happened, the possibility of poisoning of the family food, and finally the murder. When asked about Abby, Lizzie suddenly says that she thinks she saw Mrs. Borden come in and that she might be in the house. Then again she said, "We need a doctor and until a doctor comes, we can't enter the room." Churchill now runs down the street to another person's home and manages to get hold of Dr. Bowen. The second Dr. Bowen entered the room, he made a startling sound. He saw Andrew lying on the couch, dead, face chopped up. He was unrecognizable. His pulse was gone. Dr. Bowen pronounced his time of death before leaving the room. Dr. Bowen then turned to Lizzie and asked her the exact same question. Where was she? Lizzie told him she was in the barn getting iron. And then she continued telling him the story of her father's enemies and how she thought that his life was in danger. After she had finished narrating the story, she then asked him to send a telegram to her sister to tell her the bad news. Dr. Bowen agreed and then asked where was Abby, for which Lizzie gave him the same answer she had given earlier. Once Dr. Bowen left, Alice came in and Lizzie told her the same story she had told everyone. She said she was worried about Mrs. Borden and that she felt someone must look out for her. Now here, although Lizzie had earlier said that Abby was out, she now told everyone that it was important to look out for her. Basically, I feel, this is my words, and I feel like she wants someone else to go and search for Mrs. Borden. She basically wants someone else to find this dead body. So Lizzie might know something. My words, just a speculation, might. Although unsure at first, everyone agreed. Mrs. Churchill walked up the steps and when she reached the top, she could see the form of a person lying on the floor of the guest bedroom. She immediately ran down in fear. Bridget then went up and found Abby lying face down, hacked to death from the back. Andrew's left side of the face was hacked and one of his eyeballs was cut in half. He had about 10 to 11 strikes on his head and face. And according to the forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. So basically something like this happened to Abby. She was first struck on the side of her head with a hatchet, which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor, creating contusions on her nose and forehead. Her killer had then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of her head, finally killing her. She was probably making the bed for John and was killed at that time. The murder weapon was never found, but one surprising factor here was that the two murders were committed 90 minutes apart, with Abby being killed first. Lizzie and Alice were in the kitchen when Alice asked if she was all right. She then proceeded to help Lizzie undo her collar to give her some air. But Lizzie grabbed her hand and pushed it away, saying that she was all right and would not faint. Lizzie went up to spend some time in Emma's room when Alice followed her. She saw Lizzie tying the ribbons of a pink wrap dress and coming out of the room. Both Bridget and Mrs. Churchill later testified that they saw Lizzie in a light blue patterned dress with some kind of a diamond or figure on it. But this dress that she wore while she was coming out of the room was different. Why? This was never cleared. Some say that she may have changed her clothes because they were covered in blood, but no one saw any blood in the first place. Some also believe that she may have worn one dress over another, so she could easily get out of one and never have anyone see the blood. But even this theory does not seem plausible, as the dresses back then were stitched to fit tight, and it would be impossible to wear two dresses. Coming to if she killed her parents, there would have been a lot of blood splatter on her dress if she was the one who hacked them to death. And the way that they were hacked shows exactly that. Also, women's dresses back then were not easy to get in and out of. They always needed help. Especially with a person like Lizzie who had a maid. Maids were the one who helped them get into and get out of dresses. So if Lizzie did commit this murder, there has to be another person who helped her in this matter. So who could that Lizzie's helping hand be? We will come back to this in a moment. Now back to our story. By the time Dr. Bowen came from the telegraph office, there was a doctor on the scene, Dr. Allen. He was informed that they had found Abby and she was in a similar state. The cops were puzzled. It seemed a little off. After further inspection, they found that the blood was only on the victims and not anywhere else. Before they could move any further, Lizzie quickly told them that there were some bloody rags in the cellar and they should not worry about it, as it was her time of the month. So Lizzie here was pointing to those rags and telling them that please don't freak out because of those rags, or don't go in there, don't touch those things because they are mine, it's my time of the month, those are my bloody rags over there. When Lizzie was asked where she was, she said she wanted to iron some handkerchiefs, and while she was waiting for the irons to get hot, she sat down at the table to skip through a Harper's magazine. She said at this point she believed Abby was in the second floor or out, but she was not sure, and that her father was out. Now here we can see a small change in her statement at this point. She said while this, she remembered an upcoming fishing trip and was wondering if they had any sinkers. So she went into the barn to see if there were any irons lying around. She left the kitchen door open while leaving, and at this point she saw that the pear tree had some pears and she had 3 of them. She then went to the barn, climbed up the loft, and sat there and ate her 3 pears. I want to take a small break from the narration here. I did a quick read on this and it was really hot on that day. I mean really hot. So imagine her sitting outside on a really hot day eating pears. She could have just come in and ate them in the cool indoors. Her choice, but it really doesn't make sense to why a person would sit out on a hot day to eat pears. After eating her pears, she went to see through the boxes to search for some sinkers. At this point, she heard the noise and went in to find her father. Now, can I please take a moment here to say, wonderful story. I mean, hats off to Lizzie. Wonderful story. I don't mean to mock her, but her story just doesn't stick. She went out in the barn on a very hot day and was searching through metal. Metal which makes so much noise. So she was searching through this metal for some iron, and she was way out in the house, very far away from her father's room, while Bridget was inside the house, so much closer to the bedroom, and Bridget didn't hear anything. Bridget could hear the bell ring, the church bell ring, and she didn't hear Andrew. But this lady was outside searching through metal and she heard her father. How? How is this possible? The cops agreed that her behavior was off, something that they testified in court. She was said to be cold and distant, not the way that she was supposed to act when she had just found her parents' dead bodies. But that's not true. People have different ways of coping with different situations. You can't say how a person would act when they are in shock. And Lizzie had just found her father, and sometime later, her stepmother. So she may have been in shock. And men back then always thought that women were more of the weaker sex, so you tell them something, you give them some kind of a shock, and they would just faint, or they would start sweating, they would get scared, they would start shaking. So that was what was expected of women. But here, Lizzie was all strong, and she was listening, she was talking, she was giving answers, not correct answers, not proper answers, but she was giving answers, and this was something that they thought was off. And to some extent, okay, I would agree that she may not have been acting the way that she was expected, but maybe she was in shock on that day and she didn't know how to react, so she was giving direct answers, she was giving proper answers, she did not faint, she was not sweating. But what about the days later? What about later on? What about when she was in court? What about when she was given the sentence? What about all those questions that were asked in court? She was always the same. Her behavior never changed. And this is something that I personally feel was off, which made me feel that something was not right. Because she could have been in shock on the first day, or on the second day, or on the first week, but being in shock throughout, that's not something that I believe would be how a normal person would react if they saw somebody else dead and they have not done something, or they have not seen this before. Or I'm sure that Lizzie has never seen a dead body before killed in this way, or any person killed in this way. So this is something that I found really off with her. Now at this point, when the cops were talking to Lizzie, they referred to Abby as her mother, and Lizzie immediately told them that Abby was not her real mother. Not the time, Lizzie. This is not the time. I feel like she's kind of digging a hole for herself. What do you guys think? Let me know. The cops asked if Andrew Borden had any enemies, and at this time, Alice came forward and she said, "Lizzie, remember you had told me about those people who were threatening your father?" She quickly pointed at Lizzie, and then Lizzie started narrating the story of her father talking to a man, getting into an argument with him. And when the cops asked what happened, who was this man, Lizzie said she did not know much, she had never seen him before, and they weren't actually physically fighting, but voices were raised. And Andrew finally ended up kicking this man out. When she was once again asked, where was this person, who was he, what was his name, Lizzie said she didn't know. Maybe it was someone from out of town. Sounds very convenient, a very convenient story. An out of town man coming in, fighting with her father. She doesn't need proof, she doesn't have to recognize this man. It's just out of town. Lizzie's story has a lot of loopholes in it, and I'm sure that as I'm narrating the story, you can understand that there are several loopholes, several questions unanswered, several things that Lizzie starts to say and then she goes in a completely different direction. She has all these open-ended questions. She has an answer to everything, but most of them are just open-ended. What do you think? This is my opinion, my honest opinion, but what do you guys think? Now back here, Lizzie also said that she noticed a dark figure one night and she didn't know more. After the cops left, Lizzie wanted to relax in her room. The cops wanted to check her room, but they needed to ask permission because she was a lady. Dr. Bowen was then dosing Lizzie with morphine to calm her. He went inside and asked her on their behalf. He came out a minute later and said, "Mrs. Borden wants to know if it's absolutely necessary to search her room." The cops searched her room, but they couldn't find anything. They looked into the barn, but there were no footprints in the sawdust. Now this is quite suspicious because sawdust collects over time, and if someone has just walked in there the way that Lizzie said, then there has to be footsteps. But the place looked like no one has been there for a really long time. That night, Lizzie slept in her room and John slept in a different room because his was covered in blood. Now this night, Andrew and Abby's bodies were left in the living room and not taken to the autopsy. That's scary, really scary. If someone died today, their bodies would be immediately taken in for autopsy. Murdered. If they were murdered today, they would be immediately taken in for autopsy. But Abby and Andrew's bodies were laid out in the living room as the rest of the family slept in theirs. John Hyde of Fall River was posted outside the home, and he was told that they were going to sleep, and if he needed anything, then he could just knock. Alice testified that Lizzie said she was going to empty the toilet pan in the sink, and Alice offered to go with her. She then went, and while she was going, John saw them leave. Once they finished doing all the work, they came back to the room. 15 minutes later, Lizzie once again came out and walked towards the sink, and she was crouched by it for a few moments, after which she returned to the room. This time, Alice was not with her. Later on during the trial, when Alice was asked, she said she had no idea that Lizzie had gone back there after they finished it the first time. Now after 15 minutes of being in her room, Alice calls out to Officer Hyde to come in and shows him a 20-inch club near the foot of the bed. She said, "I was here last night, but this was not here." To me, it seems like Lizzie didn't want Alice anymore and she just wanted to remind her about the threats. It clearly seems like Alice was someone who was supposed to remind Lizzie in front of the police that there was some kind of threat, and now Alice's job was over and Lizzie wanted her out, but she was not ready to leave. She wanted to support her friend. On 6 August, a funeral service was held at the family home. The cops did a thorough search and took with them any clothes that Lizzie was wearing that night. This included a dark blue blouse, a patterned skirt, and a white underskirt. When Emma came home, rumors had spread. The media left very less to imagination. Lizzie was now a suspect. On the day of the funeral, the mayor came and asked if Lizzie and Emma could just stay in their room and be away from public eye, at least for some time. Now Lizzie was quite confused and she asked if anyone in the house was a suspect for the murders. The mayor did not want to tell her, so he just takes some time and gives her some kind of a clue, but not a direct answer. But Lizzie was persistent. She kept asking him over and over again if someone was a suspect, for which he finally tells, "It is you, Lizzie. You are the prime suspect." She tells him that she is ready to cooperate, and if he thinks that she is guilty, then he should just take her. Now the Bordens were killed on a Thursday, and Alice, Lizzie's friend, remained at her home until the following Monday. On Sunday, she got up and ate breakfast and left the house for a little bit to finish some work. She was back at home by noon. When she came, Lizzie and Emma were both in the kitchen and Lizzie was standing by the wood-burning fireplace. Emma asked her what she was doing, for which she said, "I'm burning something old. It's got paint all over it," so she wanted to get rid of it. Now Alice was worried looking at what Lizzie was burning because the dress looked like it was blue. Now she was afraid that Lizzie was doing something wrong and she didn't want to be a part of it. She came back sometime later and found Lizzie still standing by the fire, tearing small pieces of the garment and burning it. For this she told Lizzie, "I don't want to be a part of anything bad that you're doing. Are you doing something bad?" Lizzie said nothing. That same Monday, the police returned to the Borden home and they searched everything once again. They started with the barn and then entered the house and started in the attic all the way down until they ended up in the cellar. Prior to this search, they had taken 2 axes and a hatchet, but they seemed to be looking for something else, only that they didn't know what. They had already searched all the tools in the home, but nothing seemed to have anything to do with the murders. The police knew that they needed to search for blood, but there was no blood on any other tool in the house. While searching, they found another hatchet, or at least a part of the hatchet, which had its wooden handle broken off. There was a little part of the wooden handle left, and it was jagged, as if someone had broken it on purpose. Something else that struck the police was that on the blade of this hatchet, There was some sort of an ashy substance on both sides which gave it the appearance of being old, but this item was located in the toolbox with other tools that did not look like this one. Or did they have any of this substance on it? So they took this tool as an evidence. While they were interviewing all the remaining members of the family, they interviewed Alice. The police asked her if she believed that all the dresses that were present on the day of the murders were still in the Borden home. She said yes, although she wasn't 100% sure, especially with what she had witnessed with Lizzie earlier. She was torn between telling the police the truth and saving her best friend. So although she did save her friend, it later nagged her. To avoid this guilt, she went to Lizzie and Emma's room and told them that she felt horrible lying. She told Lizzie that burning that dress was the worst thing she could have done, whether innocent or guilty. For this, Lizzie asked her why didn't she stop her from doing it in the first place. I mean, why should Alice tell Lizzie that it's wrong? It's common sense. You don't burn things or clothes days after a murder has taken place. It's common sense. Alice should not be the one to tell Lizzie not to do something stupid. Whether she was innocent or guilty, it was not Alice's job to tell her. I'm sorry I keep trailing off, but Lizzie is doing one stupid act after another and it's driving me nuts. Just doing this research was driving me nuts. And now narrating it just makes me go back in time and understand everything that she's doing. Now Emma stepped in and said, if it is bothering you so much, why don't you just go to the police and tell the truth? We have nothing to hide. Lizzie has done nothing wrong and we are not afraid of anything. So finally Alice ended up going to the police and told them everything. They took her statement, but at this point, her statement was of no use to them. They already had everything that they needed. They had checked all the clothes in the house for blood, and if there was paint on any of the dresses, they would have definitely found that. I mean, if you are searching for blood on clothes and there is some paint, you will definitely be able to find paint. You can detect paint. So once Alice gave a statement, they immediately knew that Lizzie was lying. But they did not have to tell this to Alice. By now the police had enough evidence to arrest Lizzie. So what they did first was hold an inquest. An inquest is basically a hearing to determine if there is enough evidence to put someone on trial for murder. Lizzie's inquest was held from 9 to 11 August. And during this inquest, several people were questioned, including Bridget, John Morse, and Lizzie. One of the first people to testify was Bridget Sullivan. Now the police were really impressed with her testimony because she had a very clear and concise timeline and her story never changed throughout the trial. She knew exactly what had happened and when it had happened. She did not have to think twice about any statement. John also had a very specific and detailed alibi about where he was that day. His alibi and memory were so airtight that the police had a slight suspicion on him. He had remembered details like what number bus he took, how many people he had met, what he did, what he ate. He knew every single thing as if he had just written them down somewhere and then by-hearted them to say them in the exact same way as he would. But he had proof for whatever he said, so there was nothing that they could do about it. So finally his alibi checked out and he was free. The medical examiner said that Abby Borden had died probably between 9 am and 10 am, but most likely between 9 to 9:30 am, and that Andrew Borden had died nearly an hour and a half later. Bridget was questioned about this, but her story remained the same. Now after they finished talking to Bridget and took in her timeline, they wanted to talk to Lizzie, so they immediately left for the courthouse to pick her up. They brought her in, put her on the stand and questioned her for hours. They wanted to question her soon after Bridget so that they could see if her story timeline matched with that of Bridget's. And not only that, they wanted to see if her timeline matched with that of what she had testified earlier, or whatever she had told the police earlier. Somewhere I feel like they may have been thinking Bridget and Lizzie were together on this, and if they finish questioning Bridget and let her go, she would just run off to Lizzie and tell her what she had told. Lizzie would end up coming in next and then she would tell the exact same thing as Bridget said. So these guys didn't want to leave anything to chance. So as soon as Bridget stopped talking, they immediately raced out, got Lizzie in and started asking. They asked her the same questions. They wanted to see if her story would match what Bridget had said, if her timeline would match what Bridget had said, and also they wanted to see if her timeline would match the one that she herself had given earlier. She was interviewed by District Attorney Hosea Knowlton, and the first question he asked was, "Tell me what happened that morning." Now what Lizzie said next, her story, did not only not match up with what Bridget had said, but it also did not match up with her own original story. When she was first interviewed at her home, she said she had woken up and by the time she had reached breakfast, everyone had already eaten. She said Abby was dusting, and after this, she said she couldn't remember if she ate breakfast that morning. She said she was feeling sick the night before, so maybe she had half a banana. She then remembered there were some molasses cookies in the house, and she might have eaten a couple of those. I know sometimes it's hard to remember what we ate, and it happens to me too. You know, those mundane days, you are having your day-to-day work, the same thing you do over and over again, and sometimes you miss some things here and there. But 2 people were murdered in the house that day. How could someone forget something like that? If I was as unlucky as Lizzie to end up in a home where I would, stumble into a dead body, I would remember everything that happened in that house. It would just stick to me forever. How could Lizzie not remember? No matter how insignificant the detail was, no matter how minor it was. How can someone forget something that happened on a day a person was murdered in her own house? And it was her own father. She didn't respect Abby, that's fine. But she did respect her father. She said Andrew came down from his room, he went into town, and the 3 women went about with their day. Lizzie said she took out an ironing board and set it up on the table, and then she put her irons on the stove to heat up. Now this story of Lizzie did not in any way match what Bridget had said. According to Bridget's story, Lizzie had not taken out the ironing board until Andrew Borden had come home. So now the timeline goes something like this. John Morris left the home at 8:45 a.m. Then Lizzie came down at about 8:50 and Andrew left the house at about 9 a.m. So that would mean Lizzie was in the kitchen at around 9 a.m. Knowlton asked Lizzie how long did this take? And Lizzie said, I don't know. She could have easily used this timeline to give her some alibi, to tell that she was in the kitchen while Abby was being murdered, so she was safe. But Lizzie did not do that. She could have said pretty much anything at this point and it would have been proved as an alibi. She could have said anything. But unfortunately, Lizzie did not know this. She did not know what Bridget had said. There were only 2 people in the house during the murder. Bridget was outside washing the windows and everyone could see her. But Lizzie was all alone inside the house. The whole scenario went from bad to worse when Knowlton asked Lizzie where she was when her father arrived. So Andrew could have arrived back home around 10:45 a.m., which was only about an hour and 45 minutes from the time that he left. He was not feeling well, so he decided to come home early. So Knowlton asked her, at 10:45, when your father arrived, where were you? Lizzie said she was in the kitchen reading the Harper's magazine before she went out to the barn. This leaves her pretty much from about 9:15 until 10:45 sitting in the kitchen waiting for some irons to heat up while reading an old magazine. Now Lizzie's words stating that she was in the kitchen with the magazine when her father came home contradicts what Bridget said about Lizzie being upstairs. So remember, Lizzie had said that Andrew was trying to get in, the door was locked, she was unable to open the door and she could hear some laughter from upstairs. When she looked up, she thought that she saw Lizzie. So she could hear the voice and she said it was Lizzie. But here Lizzie is saying something completely different. So now the whole thing is something like this. Either Lizzie is lying or Bridget. Who had more motive in this case? Who had more motive to lie in this case? I personally believe it's Lizzie. What do you guys think? Now, if we go with Bridget's version of the story, then Lizzie was upstairs at the time of Andrew's arrival, which meant she was at the spot and time when Abby was killed. Her room was right next to the guest room, the place where Abby's body was found. So Lizzie was there when Abby was being murdered. Knowlton asked her if she was sure that she had been in the kitchen, for which Lizzie said, "I'm not sure if I was in the kitchen or the dining room." So now he got the chance and he kept pressing her further on this topic. He asks if she was upstairs in her room before her father returned. Now he started asking her similar questions just to see if she would change her answer. When he asked her this question on if she was upstairs when her father arrived, Lizzie said yes. She said she went in for about 5 minutes as she had to sew a bit of tape onto a garment. Knowlton asked her again, "So you were upstairs when your father was home?" And Lizzie says no. He then switches gears and starts asking her about the locks on the door and why her father couldn't get in, and that they could only be locked from the inside. He goes on for a few minutes and then jumps back to the original question, asking her, "So you were upstairs when your father got home?" So he is kind of playing Lizzie over and over again. He asks her a question and then he moves around a few more questions and then comes back to the original question to see how much difference is there in the answer. So this time when he asked her whether she was upstairs when her father got home, Lizzie said she was not sure. She then once again says, "No, I was not upstairs. I mean, I was upstairs, but then I got back down before he got home." Knowlton asked her what was she doing upstairs, and Lizzie said, "I already told you. I was sewing a bit of tape onto a garment and I brought some clean clothes to put up and put away, and I immediately came back down." She then goes on to say that she was coming down the stairs when Bridget was letting her father inside. For this, Knowlton tells her, "See, you keep changing the story on if you went upstairs or downstairs. Which one is it, up or down, or have you forgotten?" For this, Lizzie says, "I don't know what I've said. I've answered so many questions and I'm so confused. I don't know one thing from another. I'm telling you just as nearly as I know how." Lizzie changes her story once again and says, "No, I'm sure I was downstairs." She says it was another day that she remembered she was upstairs. She got confused with the 2 days and that another person was trying to get in and Bridget was trying to get him in, and she just got these days mixed up. So it was no big deal. She just got the days mixed up, the person mixed up, the same incident, she got it mixed up. No big deal. Lizzie said the last time she saw her stepmother was when Abby was in the dining room dusting. Abby had told her that she had gotten a note from a sick friend and that she had to go out, but she was going to be getting dinner while she was out, and did Lizzie want anything? And Lizzie said no, and that was the last time she saw Abby. Knowlton asked her, "Is that the last time you saw her?" Because she was dusting, and it's common sense that Abby would not go out in her dusting clothes with her hair all messed up. So she must have gotten into her room to get ready. So did Lizzie see her go up the stairs? Or if she had not seen her go up the stairs, at least she would have seen her come down the stairs and go out the main door. Lizzie says, "No, I didn't see her." So Knowlton says, "How is that possible? Where did you think Abby was? You should have seen her somewhere, inside the house, going outside the house, going into her bedroom, somewhere. You must have seen her somewhere." So Lizzie said she thought Abby was in the guest bedroom making the bed. This was what Abby had told her, that there was a guest in the house, so she needed to clean the room. Knowlton says, "Okay, but wherever she was, she would have to leave the rooms, come down the stairs, then climb up the stairs to the other end, get into her room, get ready, come down, and then pass the living room and then go out." So either ways, Lizzie had to have seen her one more time after she said that she saw her dusting. Lizzie responds, "Well, unless she came by while I was in my room for a couple of minutes, I'm not sure." So here Lizzie had said that she was in her room for a couple of minutes. So she says that unless Abby was around, she came in and she got out, those couple of minutes that Lizzie was in her room, she's not sure where Abby was because she had not seen Abby. after seeing her dusting or after meeting her while she was dusting. Knowlton says she's upstairs making up the guest bedroom and she's not going to be doing that for 2.5 hours. So why do you think she was in the guest bedroom for 2.5 hours? What did you think that Abby was doing in a bedroom for 2.5 hours? A bedroom that's not hers. And Lizzie says, well, I thought maybe she went into her own room to do her bed. I'm not sure. For this, Knowlton says, if she had to go to her own room, she would have to pass by you, right? And you said you never saw her. And unless she did this whole passing by from one room to another through the living room within the couple of minutes that you mentioned, I don't think it is possible, Lizzie. But something that Knowlton doesn't say to her, which I want to mention, is that the guest bedroom was right next to Lizzie's room. So if Abby left the guest bedroom to go downstairs, to go into her own room up the other set of stairs, Lizzie would have definitely heard her walk. She would have also heard the guest bedroom door close. She would have said something, she would have heard something, anything. But Lizzie never mentioned this, and Knowlton also did not mention this. So Knowlton tells her, basically you're saying that Abby left the guest bedroom at the exact same time you were in your room. You were in your room for about 5 minutes or so, and Abby finished her work before that and left the house. And all this happened in those few minutes that you were in your room. But as per reality, she was still in that room. For this, Lizzie says, well, sometimes she is in her room for long times and sometimes she is there for short. I can't say. Knowlton then asks her about the note. Did you see the note? Where did it go? What happened to it? Lizzie replies to all this by saying no. I feel like by this time Lizzie is starting to feel that she is messing everything up. The more she talks, the more suspicious Knowlton gets and the more proof he gets against her. So she starts answering in simple yes or no answers. Or her most favorite, I don't know. For instance, a question that was asked to her was Bridget washing the windows that day? And Lizzie says, I don't know, even though she earlier testified that she did see Bridget doing that. So by now the DA gets pissed and says, listen lady, just give us the right answers. We are trying to establish a timeline here and you keep changing your answers. Many people saw Bridget cleaning the windows that day and they testified. For this now Lizzie says, and I really find it so funny, I'm sorry I find it funny, but I really find it funny. For this Lizzie says, I know she cleaned the outside windows, but I don't know if she cleaned the inside. I was in the kitchen the whole time and I did not see her. By now the court had all the information they needed. The house was like a fortress, which cannot be penetrated by an outsider or intruder. It was so heavily locked that even Andrew Borden had a hard time getting in. So that meant that the killer was someone from inside the house. Also, the time gap between Abby and Andrew's murders was suspicious and not possible. It would be stupid for an intruder to come in and kill Abby and wait all this while in the house just to kill Andrew. And it didn't make sense because Andrew was not expected to be in the house that day. He was supposed to be out. It was just the spoiled food that made him sick and then he came back home. So there was no way of anyone knowing that Andrew would be in the house. So why would a person wait this long to kill a person whom this intruder did not know? And if he did come to steal, if he or she, whoever this intruder was, if this intruder came in to steal, why was nothing stolen from the house? Why was nothing disturbed? Just 2 people were killed. Nothing else was disturbed in the house. Why? Lizzie gave out so many different statements that it's hard to know which one is true. But if we go with the Lizzie upstairs story, then she was there when Abby was killed. So why didn't this attacker kill Lizzie? Why did he let her and Bridget alone and kill Andrew? 90 minutes this intruder was in the house when Lizzie and Bridget were alone. Whether up or down, they were alone. Why didn't this intruder kill 2 more women? Bridget and Lizzie. Why were they spared? There was no indication that this was an enemy of Andrew or enemy of Abby. It was personal. Not to mention the attacker could have killed Abby and Andrew and then escaped through the screen door because the front door was locked. Now, unless Bridget or Lizzie had a real act at the door behind the attacker, they couldn't have left from there, or they would have left through the screen door and Lizzie allegedly was back there in the barn. She could have just looked out of the window and she would have seen someone leaving. But she didn't see anyone. Lizzie was right outside. She could have seen this attacker, but she didn't. Also, they had several neighbors and someone must have seen something or heard something, but nothing. There were also several strikes on the victims. One or more blows would have been more than enough to do the job and let the killer run free. But so many strikes meant that there was some deep-rooted anger buried within. Something that I read in a report, Lizzie said in one of her statements, was that she had removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay on the sofa for a nap. If you see a detailed photo of the crime scene, then you will see that Andrew still has his boots on. Now, people knew that Andrew has his enemies, but the only person who was focused on that topic about Andrew having enemies was Lizzie. No one had the motive that Lizzie did. She was in her 30s, she was considered a spinster, living with her father, no prospects. She wasn't allowed to live the glamorous life she always wanted, even though Andrew had the money. He never gave her more than what she really required. He did not give her a lavish life, but he gave her enough to survive on. She wanted more. So if Lizzie desperately wanted this lavish life, then the only way to get that was to kill her father. She envied all her cousins and families who lived on the hill and who had glamorous parties and lived in beautiful mansions. She was also very jealous and resentful of her stepmother, whom Andrew had just gifted a house that belonged to her family. There were clear problems, and it was no-brainer that all of these problems would be solved if Andrew died. On the day of the inquest, August 11th, Lizzie Borden was arrested on 2 counts of murder and her sister Emma was sad. But Lizzie once again did not flinch. She was asked if she wanted the arrest warrant read out loud, but she refused. She was booked and sent to Taunton Jail, which was a nearby town because the Fall River didn't have a separate holding facility for men and women. The story does not end here, because Lizzie was not about to go down without a fight. So guys, here we come to the end of part 2. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I will be coming with the third and final part next week. And there we are going to close the chapter of Lizzie Borden. We are going to understand everything that happened after Lizzie was sent to prison and how did she spend the rest of her life. That's it for the day. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to follow me on social media, especially Instagram. The links are in my description box. You can also find the episode show notes on my website 3amfear.com. If you love reading thrillers, you can now check out my free ebook available on my website. Once again, thank you so much for being here today and see you next week. Have a great week and stay safe out there.